Samson and Dalila by Camilla Saint-Saëns occupies a very special position inside the French repertoire of the 19th century. The first reason is because when the composer started to write the score, he had something in mind that was completely different. His original idea was to compose a sort of an oratorio that is a non-dramaturgical work, not conceived for the theater, but more of a sort of a sacred representation. Of course, Samson and Dalila is a biblical subject, so Saint-Saëns wrote a certain number of oratorios himself. So the idea, namely the first act, has been composed and conceived like a sort of a sacred representation. Then, since the score was composed in a range of years that spans like 12 years, in between this time he came back to the composition. Ultimately, the work became an opera as we know nowadays. But inside this fantastic score, there are, as I was saying, religious elements, but there are symphonic elements, namely for what concerns the interludes of the orchestra, and as well ballet moments. This is something rather unusual, for instance, in Italian music of the same period. That is, it's not so common for Italian music to have numbers of ballet conceived inside the frame of an opera, which is, on the contrary, a very typical French element. But so if you put together all these things and you consider that Saint-Saëns was a Wagnerian orientated artist, there are other typical musical things that belong actually to that tradition. And one is the so-called leitmotiv, which is like certain themes, or musical themes that are related to specific situations of the plot. So all these things together make the score of Samson and Dalila a very specific and special creature, so that the lovers of ballet may find things very dear to them, namely the famous Bacchanale, that is an entire complete number for ballet that stops somehow the action in the middle of the most important part of the opera. But as well, symphonic lovers may find, especially the orchestration of Saint-Saëns, very symphonic in terms of a dramaturgical piece like this one. So I personally think it's very interesting because all these things are together. So in fact, despite the fact that we have a French composition, it's a very European orientated piece. So I think should occupy a very important place in the programs of the theater of the world. As a conductor, as a guest conductor, and having the privilege of conducting very often as well French music and French operas, one of the most demanding and challenging things is the fact of working on the language, because a lot of the phrasing and of the character of this music is related to the language and how actually the prosody of the language goes. Of course, when you work with non-French speaking cultures of, could be of course Slovak or Slavic language speaking people or Italian speaking people, the effort is to find a common ground on how you actually end up singing this beautiful language that has very specific characteristics, particularly difficult to put into the singing. So this is the main thing I've been working, namely with the singers. For me, the fact of coming back to Bratislava, I was here conducting a couple of years ago a new production of Maria Stuarda. It's a great honor and a pleasure, because I now know very deeply the artists of this theater. So for me, it's like to come back in a very friendly and dear place to me. So I'm very happy and confident we'll have a great performance.